Okay, let's get going. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Tech Talk titled Empowering Commissioning Providers, Addressing the Challenges of Delivering Operationally Ready Buildings. This presentation is sponsored by our longtime BCA sponsor, Facility Grid. My name is Jonathan Vaughn, and I will be the moderator for today's presentation. Please note that throughout the presentation, all microphones will be muted to minimize any background noise or feedback that may distract from the presentation. We'll be using the Q&A function for questions. So if you have any questions, please submit them through the Q&A function found in the control panel at the bottom of your screen. We'll gather all questions throughout the webinar and have time at the end of the presentation for the speakers to address them. Also, we'll be recording today's sponsored Tech Talk. Today's presenters are Eric Foreman of Facility Grid, David Powell of Arup, and Ryan Eunice of Brookfield Properties. As CEO, Eric focuses on growing Facility Grid's business through his leadership in sales, marketing, operations, and strategy. He has deep experience in real estate and financial service technologies. Prior to joining Facility Grid, Eric founded and led Resolve Technology, an enterprise application provider to the commercial real estate industry. Eric holds an MBA in entrepreneurship and real estate from Boston University and volunteers as campaign director for the Dupuytren Foundation. David is the associate principal of Arup in New York. His duties cover the design, specification, equipment approval, utility plant design, and testing and commissioning of building mechanical and control systems. David's expertise lies in the integration of real-time and IT building systems, including the technical requirements for system integration coupled with the contractual and procurement routes necessary to achieve successful integration projects. Ryan helps to oversee the design, coordination, and commissioning of the MEP systems for the Brookfield properties. The role ensures stringent design specifications and operational requirements are met throughout the construction process. The forward-looking role includes the evaluation of adopting new technologies, sophisticated controls and codes that shape or will shape future energy-efficient buildings. Welcome all.
Hi, good morning. Sorry, good afternoon. My name is David Powell. As said earlier, I'm with Arup. The piece I want to kind of talk through here, and this is really looking from a commissioning process and provision point of view, is the challenges faced with actually delivering a complete and operationally ready building. And I'll come back onto this slide in terms of no surprises, but basically we want to go through and deliver a process that at the end of the process gives us a solution that has no surprises for the owner and the operators when they come to, say, day one into day two for initial operations. So I'd like to run through some of the challenges faced by the delivery process. And this is, for me, based on the experience of delivering several major aviation projects, terminal solution commissioning and handover, and concourse commissioning and handover, really reflecting on that experience. And also widening the experience of commissioning from not just, say, the normal HVAC type of applications that, say, a lead process would require, but also to other, perhaps more specialized elements in commissioning, such as IT systems, security systems, vertical transportation, if you like, all of the elements that essentially provide a complete and working facility. So the first element I kind of want to touch to in terms of these elements, in terms of quality delivery, onboarding, and, say, early intervention, is planning and scheduling. One of the main challenges delivering successful commissioning process is making sure that the construction schedules properly align to allow time for conducting the necessary reviews that we need to do in order to prepare the relevant and appropriate documentation. Conduct things like controls integration meetings. Sometimes these are overlooked or do not get the relevant amount of time to actually act, follow and commit and do. Field reviews and observation report issuing, again, making sure that has the right focus within the process. And then running through the execution, field testing, ranging from equipment startup through pre-functional checklists, balancing, functional performance testing, and also at the back end for far more complicated projects, integration testing and integrated system testing to make sure that we have a completely functioning facility on the whole. So the challenge really is how to identify the tasks and steps and how to properly articulate the requirements for that. This is particularly true as projects become ever more complicated due to emerging technologies, system integration requirements, and ever more sophisticated methods for system controls and post-control commissioning diagnostics. So the use of fault diagnostics, AI components for predictive actions within the actual process. So this then becomes an issue of aligning the task for commissioning and turnover with the schedule format that can extract the data from those steps and present the process in a way that is visually assisting and can be understood very quickly. Usually those methods involve items like Excel versions of schedules, using elements like PowerPoint to present, and also, say, more sophisticated scheduling tools like P6 and MS Project. These are good tools, but particularly when you're leaning into the ends of items like P6 and MS Project, can be difficult to understand formats for some levels of the reviewers, and particularly where senior managers and executives are looking at where we are. Simple to understand and very cleanly identified process points become a key part in that. It's also a key element in dealing with things like schedule compression, being able to identify the impacts of schedule compression, being able to mitigate what that can mean to the process, and even lean into go, no go decisions for building openings. So if this is used properly, it can improve the ultimate quality of the project being delivered, allow the appropriate time for tasks and activities to permit issues to be addressed in a timely fashion, particularly where there's a time pressure to do so. Improve collaborative nature of the project. It can become a more inclusive process. So allow people to participate, have their points of views understood, and also make sure that the schedule is properly reflective of those decisions and the actual execution process is delivering in accordance with that schedule. It can also set priorities for tasks as we're getting closer to the finishing line in terms of critical priorities, perhaps things that can move to a day 2 condition, and also has a proper spotlight on the handover process to make sure that the owner and the owner's team are being properly involved in the processes, trained, and have the level of understanding that they need to have to take the building into that day 2 operation. So tools are needed to help communicate that. We've worked through several different formats of these tools. There are certain items that you would say you prefer or not prefer, but really the process is to lead to a point of no surprises and not have an issue day 1 opening that you're not aware of. With respect to handover, completion, tracking it into handover, making sure that all the relevant pieces are actually completed and are placed into the hand of the owner's team and necessary for further elements, and to make sure that the day 1, day 2 requirements are being met. And like I say, back to the no surprises aspect, that when the building is opening in day one, if there are workarounds needed, they can be understood. If there are contingencies required as a result of say a shortfall, that can be understood. So tracking and clearly articulating that is a key issue and something that would need to be addressed. So yeah, better planning, delivery, visualization, all improve that piece. So with that said, I'm going to hand over to Ryan to take you through things from an owner's perspective.
Thanks, David. So I'll briefly talk about the goals of the turnover process from the owner's perspective and desired features in the handover solution that I've been talking to Facility Grid and Eric about for quite a while now. So at Brookfield, it's not only my goal to deliver an operational building, but also to improve and automate the turnover process for our MEP equipment. At the beginning of the year, started to look for solutions that could help with this goal and make it as smooth as possible for the entire team. So first, let's just talk about the goals of turnover. So first and foremost, to achieve a smooth turnover, we need to be able to have a well-operated building that our operations staff understands. The commissioning process already does a lot of the work for that, for us, fortunately. But I want to emphasize the point that it starts from recording the knowledge and the history of the construction process, from design to install, testing, acceptance punch lists, get everything in there. So that when there's a problem down the line, you can have the entire history of a piece of equipment or the problem. We want all the documents, reviews, checklists, all the changes to be transferable, searchable, digestible for the end user. Lastly, the process must engage all parts of the construction team. When talking to Facility Grid's team and internally at Brookfield, we did not want just to rely on one person for this process or one entity to manage the solution. We wanted a team effort for this. Our hopes is that this would allow the method of turnover and using an application or solution to be applicable to multiple sites and multiple team configurations. Ultimately, we want to bridge the gap between construction and operations. So in this slide, talk about some of the specifics that we've talked about with Eric and his team for the turnover solution. So most importantly, we want visibility of progress of turnover. A view of the project as a whole to track status of equipment operation and documentation. It needs to be easy to read, it needs to be easy to view. Previously, project teams, as David has said, have used large spreadsheets that can be difficult to track and summarize at a high level analysis. We need to have the ability to set up custom configurations for the solution, but have a standard set of requirements to achieve turnover of equipment. Next, we wanted to merge data and document streams with the ability to export into the future. The construction process and teams has evolved with the new emerging technologies. This has made and allowed many aspects of construction to be easier, like submittal reviews, punch lists, and specifically commissioning reporting. But also it has spread out the projects into multiple applications. This can make it hard to merge the information into a package at the end. Having one platform to organize and automate document review and storage of the information for the documents, like startup reports, balancing O&Ms, would help a lot. Facility Grid, and as we talked about with Eric, helps automate this document review process while linking all these documents to specific pieces of equipment. And this helps the project team not just manually enter data throughout the whole thing, but actively be part of the project. Also, it helps to not let small issues slip through the cracks, so that at the end of the project or a year later, these issues don't come up when it's harder to fix. Another main point is we wanted to record the turnover of systems with multiple people on a project. We want to document the acceptance by the staff that operates the building, that the function is sufficient, punch list has been created, and that we have a document to show that that piece of equipment has been turned over. Since there's always overlap between the construction and operations team, we must clearly understand where the responsibility of the equipment lies at all times. Without the formality and visibility of the system turnover, the process can take longer than expected and be blurry where construction team responsibility ends. The last point I kind of want to make is for planning for the future. As 3D modeling and digital twins become more commonly used, and Brookfield are starting to use them more, it's important to have a solution that can adapt to the future and integrate into these new applications. We don't know what's coming in the future, but just having a team that is willing to work with it is important for us. So now I'll turn it over to Eric and talk about the operational readiness solution.
Great, thank you, Ryan, and thank you, David. So my name is Eric Foreman, and I'm going to go through a couple of slides. So as we heard from both David and Ryan, delivering a functional and operational facility is critical. Everyone needs to make sure that equipment and systems are tested and commissioned, O&M people are trained, and operating procedures, manuals, and documents are collected. Achieving that, especially with complex projects and an increasingly remote environment, requires a new approach, which is why we created our operational readiness solution. To understand your project's health, which is what we call it and how we're thinking of it, to support informed decision-making requires a number of factors. Number one, insights into up-to-date status of all commissioning and QC activities, having the commissioning process on everyone's radar all the time, visibility by all parties into the level of actual completion versus projected schedule, the ability to forecast for additional time to complete items falling behind schedule, manpower planning to make sure resources are available to address any items falling behind, keeping track of what's important and critical, and finally, having a streamlined project handover process. So at Facility Grid, we're providing two very powerful features to address these requirements. One is the commissioning schedule, and the other is addressing the handover process and streamlining. Okay, before getting into the details of the screen, it's important to understand that the foundation of Facility Grid is its task-based approach. This task-based approach allows you to set up your project to exactly meet your specific project requirements and scope. Facility Grid then automatically tracks the status of every commissioning and QC activity as they're being worked on, completed, and signed off. The rationale for the schedule screen you're looking at and why we built it is that while knowing the percentage of the commissioning activity that is complete is great information, and Facility Grid does track that and provide you with numerous charts providing you with that information, just knowing the percentage complete doesn't give you the full insight needed to get a complete understanding of your project status, and specifically doesn't give you enough information to act on and where to act. You could be 75% complete in a test, but if that test is critical and behind schedule, or even just behind schedule, that 75% doesn't sound so good anymore. The schedule screen shows a Gantt chart representing the schedule of your commissioning and QC activities. The screen is 100% configurable in that you select the activities that you want to track, allowing you to designate them as critical or not, and to create and set any milestones. You can also see in the Gantt chart that when an activity is scheduled, you can see when it's scheduled, when it's supposed to be completed by, and you can see whether it's on schedule or not, and you can also see what the new forecasted completion date is. And as we all know, schedules do change on projects. The time allocated to complete commissioning activities sometimes gets squeezed, but you still have to perform all of the testing activities. The best way to success is to have all of this schedule-related information known to all of the stakeholders as early as possible. So in short, what we are doing is leveraging the information already being documented during the commissioning and QC process, with that information being automatically updated and presented on the screen in real time. Our schedule feature highlights any unresolved issues and activities that are falling behind before they start impacting the project's milestones or budgets. And because it's web-based and easily accessible at any time from anywhere to all stakeholders, the project state, or project health, as we like to call it, is now fully visible to all project participants keeping everybody aligned to help ensure a successful project outcome. Another area of project health, as we're talking about, is the handover. So in terms of tracking the handover process, typically commissioning providers maintain a spreadsheet, sometimes large, similar to what you're looking at now, which identifies the status of every piece of equipment and system. Commissioning providers manually update the spreadsheet whenever new information is available or when an activity has been completed. Once updated, the commissioning provider manually shares this information via email with the project team to keep everyone in the loop. Maintaining this type of spreadsheet is tedious and on large projects can be very time consuming. Because it's manually maintained, potentially having different versions floating around, oftentimes very large and not necessarily completely visible to everyone that needs to see it, the building owner may not have the best confidence that everything that is supposed to be delivered is being delivered. So what Facility Grid has done is address these concerns. This is our handover screen. We've completely eliminated the manual aspect of the handover process. All of this data is captured in Facility Grid during the commissioning process and is automatically updated in real time. Like the scheduling feature, we've made this report accessible to all stakeholders via web access so that they have complete visibility into the status of the handover process at any time from anywhere. So let's take a couple of minutes to walk through the screen. First off, you can look at this information in different ways: by all equipment, by piece of equipment for a particular discipline, and for either one at the system level with the drop down of each of the system's equipment components, or by equipment type. Across the top is the list of activities that you set apart, that you set as part of your handover tracking. And within each activity are columns that show the status. The first column within an activity, called status, represents the state of that activity for that piece of equipment and comes directly from the schedule screen. The second column with the document icon represents the state of documentation. When you set up activities in Facility Grid, you can specify whether or not that activity requires supporting documentation. If a document is required, the cell is highlighted in gray. Once the documentation is uploaded, this column changes to yellow, and once the documentation is approved, the color turns green. And finally, the third column lists any number of any open issues and the number of open issues. So also, to ensure that all personnel have been trained, if that's part of the requirement, within Facility Grid, you can easily create an activity called training, and you can track it and have it covered in the handover screen. At the end of the day, the building owner needs to know that the building is operationally ready. He or she can have that confidence by simply looking at this screen. Number one, to make sure everything's been tested, column one has to all be green. Number two, to make sure that all the required documentation has been submitted, reviewed, and approved, and is ready to be turned over to the client, the documentation icons must all be green. And finally, three, to make sure there are no open issues, the third column should show no outstanding issues. At this point, when all those criteria are met, the building owner is assured that when receiving the project from his or her team, everything is tested, they know how to run the building, and that all the required documentation is available. So in conclusion, our scheduling and handover features deliver a complete solution to making sure that the building owner's requirements for receiving an operational ready building are met. So with that, I turn it over to Jonathan for any questions.
Thanks, everyone. That was great. So yeah, there have been questions that have come in about the scheduling. Let's start with that. In particular, from my vantage point as a commissioning provider, there's a collaborative effort with the general contractor for, establishing milestones and the anticipated duration schedules. But one question comes in on the issue of the GC schedule, providing they typically provide detailed analysis. Feedback of the schedule is one of their first tasks, so that commissioning test milestones and subcontractor prerequisite gets incorporated. That way, everyone's looking at one schedule is the key point here. Have you used a similar process, or how do you anticipate that being the collaboration between what you're proposing and what the contractor is doing and at the same time?
Okay, I guess I'll answer that one. So the intent is that our commissioning schedule will integrate with the construction schedule, so that when people are looking at the construction schedule, you'll be looking at an updated commissioning schedule as well within the construction schedule. And so we're looking at integrating with Primavera, MS Project, as well as all others.
Second question that I see is, and I'll just read it. In our experience, a lot of times the commissioning, the functional testing in particular, so the commissioning process is still ongoing even after the owner's occupants move into the facility. This is due to the readiness of the mechanical systems, building automation controls, including the BAS graphics being complete and ready to be reviewed and tested. As a building owner, facility manager, what is your opinion about this? Anyone want to tackle that one?
Sure, yeah. So I think this only more strongly emphasizes the point of we need to know exactly where the equipment turnover stands. It's inevitable that functional testing is going to bleed into the part where occupants are in the building, just by the construction process, especially with the BMS. Being able to know exactly from the handover module where a piece of equipment stands and who is operating that piece of equipment, whether it's our operations staff or whether it's still under construction responsibility, is kind of the main points that we need in the handover solution. So for us, it's an inevitability. It's part of every project. And so knowing a hot water system is being controlled by the operations staff or it's being monitored by the construction staff is part of what we're using this handover solution for. And say you can't do one part of the testing, you can always add it as a punch list item or on the issues log and have it in there and still document the turnover of a piece of equipment and defer the testing. So that's where not letting even the smallest tests slip through the cracks, because you can always document it and link it to a piece of equipment and still turn over that piece of equipment and be on the same understanding on every part of the team.
Okay, anyone else want to chime in?
Just add to that, it rolls back to the whole notion of no surprises, right? So yes, the process would run beyond that, but everybody's on the same page as to what the situation is with regard to, say, systems and commissioning elements and any workaround or contingency solutions that might be required to deal with that. So yes, whose hand is it in? Construction or owner? What's the process of rolling it to the owner day two? And do other rules, if you like, come into play? And again, I'll kind of roll back onto the kind of aviation experience, but once the airport terminal or concourse is open, your ability to go in and test and hand over shifts. So that may become an out of hours activity versus a normal day shift activity. So some of this is going to give that heads up in terms of the no surprise element, and also allow proper planning and understanding of what will be involved in actually doing that process in a day two environment versus a day one environment.
Okay, let's move on to some other questions. Maybe Eric, you could pull the share your screen again. Well, that is the screen. You are sharing your screen. Go back to the columns where you had, yeah, that one. The question here is in the handover screen, are the main columns, like equipment submittals, equipment startup, et cetera, are they customizable?
Yeah, they're 100% customizable. You can label them whatever you want, and you can have as many or as few as you want.
And then are these being tied to in your database, like the issues log? Is it being, it's all being tracked and just another place to see how it relates to where you are in the process?
Exactly. You actually set them up in the, what you're looking at is the, in the left-hand nav bar. You set them up in the task area, and that automatically populates the handover screen. So
Okay,
yeah,
great.
everything is fully tied together. It's really single, one-time entry, no redundant data entry. And as items are completed, it automatically populates this screen.
I would just chime in. I know, like, for us, we're starting one of our first projects with it, but we made a standard set of CX tasks that come up in the for the columns and set those up. And so anytime you add an issue to it, that gets linked to a piece of equipment. And so one of the big parts for us that's important is when we can go into that piece of equipment, and for any type of task on the project, we can see what the issues were. So if it's a balancing report, if it's a water balancing report, air balancing report, startup report, anything, they're all linked to that piece of equipment, so we can see it. And it's not dispersed between 4 different PDFs. So it makes it a lot easier to troubleshoot down the road.
Yeah, just kind of add to that. We're going through a similar process at the moment, setting up a project right now. And the interesting thing with the scheduling function, also the handover element, is you do take a little more time perhaps and kind of dig to the next level of what the tasks should be to properly show status and process. So it's a good kind of round of thinking about the process to make sure that all of the necessary elements are identified so you can clearly see where you're at. So sometimes it's kind of like reflecting on, what were the things that kind of held us up on previous projects that had we had better data on early on, would really help with that process. So that this has been a good exercise to actually kind of work through that.
Okay, let's move on. There's a question here about does Brookfield use a CMMS database for operation and maintenance, and then how does Facility Grid integrate with that database?
So we do use our operations team does use a CMMS database, but as I kind of mentioned, we're moving into a digital twin use that we're testing out right now. And so a lot of the different applications that either operations or construction has used are being integrated into this one platform. So Facility Grid we're looking more Facility Grid to integrate into the 3D model and digital twin of the building, rather than the CMMS software. I don't know, Eric, if you want to talk about CMMS at all.
Yeah, 2 things. One is that we do integrate with the digital twinning software that Ryan is referring to, and then from a CMMS standpoint, we integrate with all CMMS software packages.
Okay, there's another question on scalability. Does facilities scale to small projects, for instance, single room remodel and a healthcare facility? Can all projects within a building be presented as a single ongoing project, like a rolling completion log?
So the short answer to both those questions are yes. You can use Facility Grid on large projects, small projects. You can create templates and just work right off of those templates when starting a new project. So even if it's small, you can get up and running pretty quickly. And then can you set up Facility Grid so that you've got multiple projects within a building, within the same project, within the same Facility Grid project? And yes, you can do that as well.
Okay. So what about, let's return probably on this handover page. Are these fields in the schedule, are they static? Are they clickable?
Yes, so I can't click on them because they are screens,
Sure.
PowerPoint screens, but I don't know if you can see my cursor. Can you?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, you can click on any of these items and it drills right into the item that it's representing. So if you would click on status right here, it brings you right to the screen that's capturing that information. For instance, the document icon right here. If I were to click on the number 1, which represents there's one document, I click on that, it automatically brings me into that document. And then finally, in the open issues, I can click on any of these open issues red cells, if you will, and that brings me directly into those open issues. And then you could come right back. And the same thing with any section of this, you can click and it brings you right in to the area of the product that it's represented in.
And then how simple is it to change the dates on the schedule?
Very simple. So if I were to go to the schedule screen, which is this, the data here is also clickable. So you can click on any of these and it brings you to the input screen where you're documenting this task as well as the begin and end dates. So you can change them right there and then you come right back to this calendar, to this Gantt chart.
Okay, great. I think we're going to wrap it up, guys. Like to make some closing statements here. Just a thank you to Facility Grid for sponsoring this presentation. And thank you to all of today's speakers. We really do appreciate your time and expertise. So on behalf of the BCA, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's presentation, and I hope you have a great day and a great holiday season.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, John.